We're here. It's 2020. Who knows where we're going? What's going to happen? Is there an economic collapse coming this year, right? We're recording this July 1st, 2020. There are 6 months left in the year. Could there be a major global economic meltdown? That's a question we're going to talk about today. We're going to give you the answer in the first 5 minutes, but then after we share the answer, we're going to be providing some hope. So stick around. We got an exciting ride ahead.
Wait, so we're going to give the answer for real?
We are.
This is huge. So my name's Brandon, and this is Amanda. We're with Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. Thanks for joining on these videos. If you're joining, of course, in the future, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, all that fun stuff. Write a comment in the chat and let us know. What's a good word? What should we say that they should put in the comments? Hope. If you want hope in the midst of crisis, put that in the chat. Let us know, and just put that there. So, thanks for joining us. And again, we want to provide hope in the midst of all of this craziness. Because, man, I don't know about you, but this whole when we started in January, I didn't think any of this was going to happen.
Right.
Did you?
Right. Yeah. So we did it, but in preparation for this video, we did a search on YouTube and we just typed in, is an economics collapse coming in 2020? And there were over 3 million videos that were in the results of that search. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's so much different data, depending on what data you look at. Probably we didn't look at all 3 million videos, but if I were to guess, a lot of them are sharing a lot of hype and spreading a lot of fear about what the second half of 2020 could look like economically with the global markets. And we do not want to regurgitate all of that here within this video. You can go look at that as much as you want to, kind of go view at your own risk, do that search yourself at your own risk. It can be a total rabbit hole to go down to. But here's the short answer. You ready for this? Here's the answer. Is there an economic crash coming in 2020? Brandon, what's your answer? And then I'll share mine.
I think we've been dealing with all kinds of stuff, and the possibilities are yes and no. It depends on everybody's personal finances. Some people are going to experience one, and some people are not.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Here's my answer. Possibly. But if you ask the broader question, is an economic crash coming? The answer is absolutely yes, right? At some point, there will be a global economic meltdown that impacts 99% of the world's population and only a few, and impacts, it's probably 100%, right? Some people it'll impact really, really poorly, and some people will get rich off of it, just like every other crash that happens. So really the question becomes, if a crash is inevitable, whether it happens within the next 6 months or the next 6 years or the next 60 years, right? Whenever it's going to happen, what are we doing to prepare? What could we be doing? And so the kind of extremes become financial preppers, right? And they're going to extremes, but there's also helpful prepping to do. And what we want to do today is talk about 6 different ways that people are prepping for a possible economic collapse, and what those weigh some of the pros and cons of the ways that they're prepping. Now, we pick 6 things. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list of the things that people are doing, but it's meant to give you some things to think about, to discuss with the people you share financial decisions with, and you make those decisions together. And to bring to your team of financial professionals as you think about what you should be doing with your money, with your job, with your life, with your business, with all of those things right now. In case a collapse is within the next 6 months, the next 6 years, the next 60 years, right?
Or 2 months. It could be anytime.
Right. Who knows? Yeah. So I'm framing these 6 as temptations. We're calling them the 6 temptations because like we're all tempted to react in certain ways, but these are also invitations to be proactive instead of just reactive. The 6 temptations, if you're offering them as a reactive way to, holy cow, there could be something coming, I better, and you're going at it in that way, these become temptations and paths that could have negative consequences. When you go at it in a proactive way and you say, okay, there could be a crash. Let me think logically. Let me also tap into like my gut and my emotions to see what feels right. But let's play a little bit more strongly on my brain and what I think is going to happen and what logically I could do to do that. Then it transforms these temptations into opportunities. So I want to look at these 6 temptations, talk about how they could go awry and how they could be opportunities possibly. And we're just riffing on this. We didn't actually prepare much. I just made the list of the 6 and we're going to see where it takes us. So what we want to hear from you as we're going through these is, what do you think? What pro or con did we forget about? What way is this thing a temptation, and what way is it an opportunity? Share those things in the comments. We'd love to hear from you and make this a video that helps people think through the decisions they're making. Okay. Anything you want to add before we jump into these 6, Brandon?
Yeah. So one thing I was thinking is we watched this video from the Economist, and it was about if an economic, like, because we were like, is this is something that's interesting to look up. So we looked up, of course, videos, and this video was recorded in 2018. I think it was around October, or I'm not sure. The funny thing is, and maybe not so funny, is everything pretty much that they said has happened.
Or is happening.
Or is happening right now. And for me, I'm like, oh, that's kind of scary. And anyway, so looking at that and saying, yeah, it is possible. And so if you Google and look up The Economist, Google this is an economic collapse coming on YouTube, you will see The Economist. Watch that video, and I'll have the show notes in there as well, or I'll have the links. But we're not the only ones thinking about this, is what I'm saying. So
yeah, remember there were 3 million hits on "Is there an economic collapse coming?" when we put that into YouTube.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's important. I think that what we're talking about, each one of us, it will affect us. And the question is, when we share these 6 things, these 6 behaviors, think about where you are in that, because you probably fall into one of them.
Yep, or multiple. I do have to give a quick teaser. This Friday, we've got a really awesome interview with one of our heroes coming out. I'll go ahead and reveal who that is. His name is Perry Marshall. And at the end of that interview, we talk about this whole topic, and he has some really cool insight that he shares about ways to be ready for unexpected events to happen and to roll out. So be sure you subscribe to this channel, make to that you get that video in like 48 hours or less. Or if you're catching this after July 3rd, be sure you go find that video. We'll try to update description below this video to have that link when it's actually live and out there. Okay, without further ado, the 6 behaviors that could be temptations or could be opportunities. The first one, bury your head in the sand and figure it out later. I mean, what can you really do? It's a global meltdown that could happen that I'm screwed anyway. I might as well just live my life and not do anything. Brandon, what would you say about how this is a temptation?
I mean, I think we are all overwhelmed, and we think, well, I'll just deal with that later for anything, right? Having family stuff, business stuff, any of that, we tend to do this whenever it's too much. And so for me, I think, yes, that we do bury our head in the sand. When it comes to inbox management, oh my gosh, sometimes I'm like, all right, I'll close it and not deal with it. Doesn't mean it goes away. And just makes the problem bigger in the future. So I think the reality is, if you feel that you're burying your head in the sand and you're ignoring a problem, then don't. I don't know. Does that make sense? I mean, like, the only thing to do is get your head out of the sand. Do something.
Yeah. So kind of the temptation here, or the unintended consequences of burying your head in the sand, is that the things you could have done to make a global crisis easier on you, on an economic collapse easier on you, you don't do. And then you get hit just as hard as you normally would have. But on the flip side, if you do try to do something, you can get frustrated, right? Kind of like your inbox management there, Brandon, because you try to do something, you just get pushed back down, right? You try to make a change and you can't figure it out. And this is where I think if you come back to some of the really powerful thinkers around growth mindset, I mean, Carol Dweck with her book, I think it's just called Mindset, where she talks about how always seeing your future as bigger than your past and having that kind of mentality, that can really transform us, right? If our lives are really about personal development and growing and becoming better versions of ourselves, sucking less tomorrow than we do today, then when you just bury your head in the sand and say, well, I'll figure that out later, or I don't have any control over the situation, what can I really do? We're in that fixed mindset. We're not growing. We're not seeing the opportunities. And sure, if we do try something and it doesn't work, then we can at least learn from it, right? Failures are nothing if they're not opportunities to learn. And so I think that's really it's a safety mechanism to bury your head in the sand. You're safe when you just say, I'm going to ignore it. Like you feel safer, right? When you say,
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore it, but you might not actually be safe, but at least you feel safer. You've got a lot less stress and anxiety by going la, 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 and ignoring the world around you. But that also means you're not growing. And there's a really great opportunity to grow. And as a human being, the thing that matters most, right? Not how much money you have, not whatever, but the things that you learn and are able to do. Which we're going to come back to that whole idea of learning in one of these. I think it's number 5. So let's go on to number 2. There's the temptation to hoard, to just like your typical doomsday prepper, right? Keep as much as you can on you. Keep your cash, your toilet paper, your canned goods, all the things. Just hoard everything closer to you and in, and just gather it around and keep it close. This is another mechanism by which we feel safe, and I think that's the reason people hoard, is for that feeling of safety. Whether or not they're safe, they at least feel safe. What do you think about this one, Brandon?
I mean, I think it's interesting that the toilet paper thing and how that whole thing played out. And I think that there's going to be, if there's thing that happens a lot, like this collapse, there will be a lot more of those people like grabbing hold of their stuff and or trying to go to the grocery store and buy all the meat because hey, we might not have meat in the future or something. And I think that, man, that's sad because there was not a little preparation in advance. I mean, I felt like I don't know, the toilet paper thing. At least I have a little bit, and if it gets bad, we have trees in the back. I don't know.
So
But
yeah, go ahead.
I just think it's again the fear part of us starts coming in, and we start freaking out and saying, "I got to go do this before," because we didn't actually plan ahead.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
So in planning ahead, it can be helpful to have some extra beyond what you need, right? Um, but you don't want to be overwhelmed with extra so that it just goes to waste if you don't need it. That's kind of the catch 22 of prepping in case of an economic collapse is it could delay, right? It could not happen when you think it is, and then those canned goods expire or the toilet paper gets ruined by water or whatever. But if we're thinking about money, I think it actually does make a lot of sense to keep a nice hoard of cash, right? Because then no matter what happens to your job, to your cash flow, your sales, if what depending on your industry, you at least have that cash to pay your bills, to buy food, to find those things. And cash could look like different things, right? We're using cash as kind of a metaphor for money, for the form, a means of exchange. And something that's accessible, liquid, and that you can use to trade for other goods. That can actually be something to be thinking about is how much do you need to hoard and how much is too much to hoard, where you become a hoarder instead of a smart saver, right? And what you might want to do if you're trying to make that decision is look back to people you knew in 2008, 2009 who lost their jobs and how long it took them to find new jobs. And then take however long that is and multiply it by how much you need to cover your basic needs for that amount of time. And that's how much cash to prep, right? That's an easy formula to think through. Personally, I know people that were out of work for at least 2 years. So that's one of the things that I try to strive to have is a hoard of cash equal to 2 months of just basic living expenses, not anything extra, like no fancy vacations or anything. And I think that's a nice, good rule of thumb and where the opportunity is, because then also, let's say the economic collapse happens, but you don't lose your cash flow. You still have a job, you still have sales, whatever it is. Guess what? You can use that cash to take advantage of the opportunities that are there, right? The homes that sell for cheap, the businesses that sell for cheap, the services that you can buy for cheap, whatever it might be, you're going to have the cash available when other people don't, which actually expands your opportunities that way.
Well, and I seriously, I was just listening to another video, again, doing research for this, and I found somebody who, again, another video in 2018, is an Asian guy, and I don't know, he has a lot of subscribers. Anyway, he was like, yeah, I think something's going to happen, and move it to cash and be ready. Will you make as much in the market right now? And this is in 2018. No, but you're going to make a whole lot whenever it is that time. Or you're going to at least be able to buy toilet paper. Not that he didn't say that, but
that's the idea. Yeah,
that was the idea. So it was really good.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, there's the idea, well, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to go ahead and buy that big thing now, whether it's a new car, a house, a vacation, whatever it is, I'm going to go ahead and buy that something big now because in a few months I might not have the money for it, or I might like not be able to find it or what have you. Now, this is something we have personal experience with right now too, Brandon. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So we are planning on buying some windows,
We need
and
windows in
we
our
need
house. They're
windows.
leaky. They're windows that are like 40 years old at this point.
And as we were researching windows, apparently it's like everything else. Um, there's the really cheap ones, and then there's the really expensive ones. And we're trying to evaluate what do we go for, and then if we spend that money, it could be upwards of $10,000. But once I've spent it, then it's it's gone. And the other factor for me, I'm like, well, if a crash happens in October, I can buy windows for cheaper, probably, maybe, or not. I don't know. And but our temptation has, I mean, again, buying a new house, there's always a temptation to upgrade. Um, but we're like, do we buy now or do we wait? And we've kind of held off because there's too much uncertainty out there.
Yeah.
So we've fallen in this uh, with big purchases.
Yeah. So, and take the example of going and buying a car. If you're getting a car loan, this you might be able to get approved for one now, but if there's an economic collapse, you lose your job, or they're just not lending money like they used to, you wouldn't be able to get a loan for that car. There can be all kinds of uncertainty about these big purchases that we make. People who are buying homes right now, like some people, because they're working from home more often, they need that home because they need to work from that home, and that's a big deal for them to be able to have a good work environment. Whereas other people are saying, "Well, I'm going to actually wait because in a few months, housing prices could go down and I could get a better deal." So it's kind of you don't know, right? This is where there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think the rule of thumb here that at least we're using is we don't have to rush. But if there's always good deals to be found. Like even today, we got an ad in the mail. I don't think Brandon saw this yet. We got an ad in the mail for a great deal on Windows with 0% financing for 2 years or something like that, half off the actual Windows themselves, so on and so forth. There's still good deals out there. The thing is putting in the research, looking at what are those things, where are they, and then being confident when you make a decision to buy that thing that you made the right decision in that time. And even if time changes, right, even if what would be cheaper in a few months or whatever, you still feel that confidence that you made the best decision you could given the certainty that you had, right, and that you weren't making decisions based on what if. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 4. There's a lot of people doing this right now, buying as much stock as possible, literally gambling that the market is going to go up instead of down. There's so many, it's kind of like if Wall Street's a casino, there's so many people in the casino right now putting all their chips on the table, trying to play the game, trying to win. And it might be true. I've heard it said before that in times of economic uncertainty is where the most money is made.
Yep.
And that could totally be true. I don't want to say it's not true or it is true. I don't know. I don't have money in the stock market, and for very personal reasons, I don't do that yet, as of the recording. But if I were thinking about playing that game now, I know I'm probably going to be the one on the losing side because I don't have the knowledge and the expertise to go do that. And I'm sure not going to give that over to somebody else who may or may not make good decisions. I mean, or a robot, right? A computer to make those decisions for me. I would want to put in lots of time and effort researching before I would want to play that game and go gamble. Like, I've maybe played poker a few times in my life. I'd probably study really hard, do a whole bunch of poker with like candy or pretzels or something before I'd go and put my money on a poker table, right? In Vegas or whatever. The same thing with stocks. Uh, Learning and having a game plan before you go in. But I don't know that people are doing that. I totally took that one and went first there, Brandon. Anything you'd add to that?
Well, I think again, some of it's becoming gamified, and people are like, "Oh, I'm doing this and that," and I feel like in industries, like it's tech industries today, it's Boeing tomorrow, it's something else the next day, and we have to be experts in everything when it comes to that. And I think again, going back to some of our episodes, your biggest investment is yourself. Maybe if you know it, that's a different story. But I don't know how many people this is just a side thing. And, there's the Robin Hood, there's the things that make it easy. And maybe you are doing well right now. But I do worry about October. Is if there is an economic crash that's coming, it is not going to be slow. It's going to be sudden, and a lot of people.
In your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it happened in 1987 and then like in the Depression, like that. So it's looking historically, possibly, but it's more than likely going to happen real fast, and we're not going to have time to react. Maybe. And so that's a challenge that I think is hard. And there's so much temptation to buy as much stock as possible because apparently we're going to make a whole lot of money. But are we damaging our local economy at the expense of what's happening in the market?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point, thinking about what's happening in your local economy and if what's happening in the stock market and with big business, how that's going to impact the local economy, local businesses, your home value, all kinds of things like that can be impacted.
And is it actually correlated with, is Wall Street actually correlated with Main Street? At this point, I don't see it.
So. Right. Yeah. Okay. Number 5, to go back to school. Now, this is a big one for me. I'm going to jump in here because this is where, as a person who finished college in 2006, got my first full-time, real job in 2006, and then saw what happened to some of the people that were a few years younger than me in school when they graduated in 2008, 2007, right, had a harder time finding jobs. What a lot of them did was go back to get graduate degrees. Tons of people went into MBA programs, at least just from my experience of what being someone in their 20s during that time. I knew lots of people who couldn't find jobs. So they just said, well, I better go get a degree in order to be more employable. Right. And I have to do something with this time. I'll just go get that degree. And then in 2 years, the economic crisis will be over and I can get a great job. Kind of the thinking there. And then what I've discovered is that there was a whole group of people. I have no idea how many, but I've met a few of them who also did that when they got laid off, even though they were in their 50s. Or maybe sometimes in their 60s, they also just said, well, I better become more employable, so I'm going to go back and get another degree. Maybe they already had a master's and got another master's, so they decided to go after a PhD or whatever. And then I'll just ride it out in school until the crash is over, things are recovered, and then I'll get a better job. And I don't know about you, but a lot of those people, couple years later, 2010, 2011, I still saw them struggling to find jobs, even though they had a graduate degree. And if you This is one of the things, like, when I think about even the future of college education, just the first 4 years, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're gonna get a job. Same with a master's or a PhD, like, you might think it's gonna make you more employable, or it's just gonna make you overqualified for the jobs, right? And then it goes to someone else who never did those things and doesn't have the debt they need to pay off having done those things. And that's where I think if you're gonna think about going back to school, and it's the whole reason going back to school is a thing is so that you're more employable, you're more likely to get a job after the collapse is done, then I would think you'd wanna go to a trade school. You'd learn a trade. Plumbing, electric, computer science, right? Computer coding. There's even online platforms that you can do that kind of stuff for free and get different certifications to make you more employable. Wouldn't that be a better or an avenue to explore at the minimum to make yourself more employable through those means rather than going into debt trying to get a piece of paper that is going to actually potentially could make you overqualified for jobs. And the same could be true for lots of different fields and lots of different sectors and lots of different ways to kind of ride out the time. Like, instead of going back to school, you could say, well, let me just go volunteer. Add some things to my resume, do that kind of gap year or AmeriCorps if you're young enough, or if you're older, say, well, if I'd love a job in the nonprofit sector, I'm going to go volunteer for some of my favorite organizations, and then maybe they'll hire me when they're hiring again. There's tons of ways that people think about how to make themselves more employable, including going back to school. Going back to school might just be the most costly of them all, depending on how much grants and scholarships you can get versus loans. That was totally me standing on a little pulpit and giving my opinions about this. I hope that that's something fun to chew on for you, whether you agree with me or not. I'd love to know. Brandon, anything you'd add before we go to number 6, the final one?
I think, again, that whole idea with the school thing is people are like, oh, well, this is going to solve the problem. Or I'll put into the market, so that's going to solve the problem. I'll put my head in the sand, so that's not going to solve the problem, but I don't have to deal with the problem. The reality is we want to take control of this, and maybe going back to school might solve a problem, depending on the situation, what you're going to school for, how much does it cost. But also, I see a lot of schools that are probably going to downsize, and some other things that are going to happen because of it. Furloughs being paid, all kinds of stuff I saw with Northwestern recently.
So school starts in August or September, like the fall restart could happen. So you got a couple months to think about it, make an informed decision, weighing all the factors. Okay, number 6, the temptation to start a business. This is a huge one for us. If you know our story, you might know that we opened a business in 2011, just after, the Great Recession, as we were still coming out of that. What you might not know is that it was around this time in July of 2007 when Brandon started coming up with the idea to start a business. And I would say, no, we are not doing that. We've got these good jobs. We're not going near that. And he wore me down and convinced me that that's a path we should go. And then March 2008, we wrote our first business plan. And then, of course, the recession really hit big time after that. So we are like, if this is how do we prep in case there's an economic collapse, if you're already thinking about starting a business, there's no reason not to do some of that foundational work. Do the dreaming, write the plans, come up with ways to test your ideas and figure out if this is a path you should go on. And then if you're already on that path when the collapse happens, whether again 6 months, 6 years, or 6 decades, you can decide whether how your path needs to change and that kind of thing. If you use like the lean startup model and you're bootstrapping, you're figuring things out, you're not going to have a whole bunch of expenses you have to fulfill and all that kind of, you're going to be able to pivot, and you might be poised to take advantage of that collapse really well. The interesting thing is we've also seen a lot of people, because we were starting, right, 2007, 2008, as things were ramping up. We also saw a lot of people try to start businesses in 2009, 2010, right, when they were just coming up with the idea. And then 2011, 2012, like into things as a recovery, that's when they came up with their idea. And we've met lots of people trying to start businesses every single year since, right? And seen what happens at the various stages of recovery as people start those things. And I think we had a little bit of an advantage when we started with wanting to start in a way that was that lean startup before we even knew those words, right? We just said, well, we don't have anything to get this business going. We got to figure it out. How do we start a business with nothing? Go. And we just started talking to people and building things and bootstrapping like crazy. And I think that's part of what gave us the advantage. If we would have started from the place, well, we've got this $50,000, what would we do with it? I think we would have crashed and burned really easily, especially as there was like serious crisis happening and all of that. So I think that kind of shows you how starting a business can be a temptation and how it could be also an opportunity when there's a pending economic collapse that could be coming. Anything you would add to that before we wrap up with the most important thing?
Well, I think, again, sometimes it's not just economic collapse globally, but personally collapse. And a lot of people hear starting a business and you can make a lot of money. And so then they start this business and it's not very profitable in the sense of they're paying themselves. And so they are doing this business and it's not really working for them. It's another way around. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there who maybe have lost their jobs and they don't want to go work for somebody again. So then they're going to start a business. And if that's you, find people that can be like what's the five people you spend the most time with or something like that. Find mentors, find guides who have been down there, because starting a business is very difficult. You might think I'm really great at baking, so therefore I'm going to go bake and start a business. However, there's a lot more involved in doing that than baking. You actually have to sell the stuff. You actually have to have staff and all of that. So starting a business could be more harmful than good. Again, making sure you have the right team around you.
Yeah, and you're learning and growing before you ever even get started can be, but not getting stuck in just learning mode too.
Yep.
Yeah. So to wrap up here, I wanted to show you a couple things. I'm going to screen share our website. If you've never been to grandmaswealthwisdom.com, this is what it looks like. You can kind of see a little bit of what we stand for. One thing, we wrote all of this at the end of 2019. We went through and did a whole website revamp, and you'll notice a few things here. Recession resistant. Can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
We specialize in strategies that keep growing even when the overall economy isn't growing, stays accessible, that liquid cash idea, and that you can keep your net worth moving up without the fear of catastrophic losses, that idea of consistent growth. That really is, right, how we help people fortify yourself against the volatility of the market and break through to a smart, stable financial future. That's we're not saying don't do the market. We're saying fortify yourself against all the volatility that's in the market. And there's a whole, we talk about, building stability a lot. And you'll notice this little triangle here that's like a mountain. What I want to show you is if you go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/list of episodes, or if you hit the podcast page, you'll see the list of episodes that you can go see. And then you scroll way back to the, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th podcast episode that we did. Really, these ones are kind of intro things. So it's really our 3rd podcast episode ever. I think this was back in 2018 when we published this one. And you click on that, building a financial stability pyramid that lasts. Remember, a stitch in time saves 9. There's a couple images here that I just want to just show really quickly. These two.
Can you zoom in on that?
Maybe.
There you go.
Okay. So here is an instability pyramid with safe and liquid cash reserves as a tiny little bit of the portfolio, and then money at risk as a big part of the portfolio. And you can see how this could tip over at any point. You would not want to be walking around the base of this pyramid, right? Whereas this pyramid, where you've got the safe and liquid cash reserves that are equal to at least 2 years of household income, and you're building on top of that things that are relatively safe, and then the things that are at risk at the top there. This is a pyramid. It'd be totally nice to walk around the bottom of this in the shade and feel safe and secure there, no matter what other things are happening in the global economy or within your local economy. I'm going to put this link in case you want to check this out into the comments on this video, so you can check it out really easily that way. But that's kind of what we're talking about. If you're preparing for the possibility of an economic collapse, again, whether it's in 6 months, 6 years, or 6 decades, maybe even within 6 days, right? Which one do you think is going to survive an earthquake, right? Which pyramid? Which pyramid would survive a hurricane? Which pyramid would survive a total economic collapse that's on a global scale? And then
I think this goes to businesses too.
Right.
Like these businesses that we will not see in 6 months. Think about this when you're I don't know, reflecting on the business. Which business model did they have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how are they building stability and security for their business side too? I'm going to leave it at that in terms of helping, again, we're putting these ideas out there, helping you think on your own. We're here to empower you to make financial decisions, to take control of your financial future. We don't want to ever tell you what to do. We want to help you think through the decisions that you're making and how to make the best decisions for you. And if you want to have some more discussion over how can I make my money more recession resistant, how can I build more stability into my portfolio, please, we'd love to talk to you. I'll go back to that website here. Let me zoom back out. You click this request a meeting here, or another really fast way to find out how to get started with us is to go to grandmaswealthwisdom.com/start. And once it loads, you can see a place where you can schedule a 20-minute exploratory conversation. We're just going to ask you what questions do you have, right? And talk through those questions, and then explore for a good fit to continue the conversation and work together more. So really easy to pick one of us and schedule on our calendar there. We would love to talk to you if that would be helpful for you in making decisions and carving your path ahead, regardless of what happens with the economy overall in the coming days, months, years, and decades.
Yeah, I think going again, some of it is whatever happens on Twitter, what happens on in oil, or all of this, none of this should be what deters you from having a stable financial future. I think that that's really important, and where we want to end today. Also, I want to say today, Amanda and I celebrate 14 years of being married. July 1st, we are getting married. No, we were already married by now.
Yeah, we were on our way to our honeymoon by now.
Yep. So 14 years ago, we were married. So, and we've been doing business together for almost more than half of it. So,
Yep.
long time. So, cool. I think that's all I got. You guys keep being awesome and continue to break through to a smart, stable financial future.
Peace.